Oh, hi. Today, today I'm going to be talking to you about how to be an imperfectionist. And before I go into that, have you noticed this guy in the background? Do you notice this background? Which program is it from? If you get it right, then and leave it in the chat, then you win a prize. Okay, let's see if you can work it out. So I'm going to be talking about imperfection and how imperfection can actually lead to excellence. So how to actually be an imperfectionist rather than how to be a perfectionist, and why that's really, really important. And I'm going to do that by sharing a story of how I was, I guess, too much of a perfectionist, and it got me into a bit of trouble. So I've written some books. My first book was called Mindfulness for Dummies, and I've never written a book before, obviously being my first book. But also wasn't really particularly good at English. I struggled at that at school. I much preferred science, and so having this burden of having to write a book was a real challenge for me. So I got this, I went through. It kind of happened by accident, actually. It's a separate story, but I ended up having this contract, and they said, "Okay, go ahead, start writing the book." I'm like, "Wow." Um, I started asking for some tips and stuff and examples of books, and they sent a couple through. But then I just had to start writing. So I had to write the first paragraph of the book, or the first sentence, obviously. And I wanted to start by just defining what mindfulness is. And so I thought, okay, I need to get the right definition of mindfulness. And I literally bought about 30 books on mindfulness, maybe more, and every single one had a different definition. And I was just trying to get that first sentence perfect for this book. And I kept trying, and I literally spent a whole week trying to write the first sentence of the book, which is mindfulness is what? And I just couldn't work it out. And I was just going around in circles. And I only had 4 months to actually write this whole book, and I was still on the first sentence in the first week. And then luckily I had this crazy but great idea, which is to buy a book about how to write a book. So I ordered the book. I think I ordered the book How to Write a Book in 60 Days or something. So I ordered that book and I started reading it. And in that book, the main thing I learned was you need to separate editing your work from actually writing your work. And they said you've just got to start by writing a stream of consciousness, just writing whatever comes into your head, just type it or write it down. And on that day or in that morning, do not do any editing at all, not even correcting spellings or grammar. It can be complete nonsense. You can even write the sentence like, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm writing. Why am I even writing this? You just write that down too. You just write everything that comes into your head. And that was amazing for me because at the beginning I was writing complete nonsense like that. And then I started to, some great sentences started coming out and some definitions of mindfulness started coming out and it started to flow. There was this sense of I'm not doing it. And just the sentences were popping into my head and I was typing them out and I got into this amazing flow. And that's how I ended up managing to write the book on time. And I remember what really scared me is that they told me, Shamash, you need to write the book. You need to make sure it's done by the deadline. If you don't get it done by the deadline, then you have to pay for somebody else to write the book by the deadline. I'm like, whoa, okay, I really do need to write this book. And I was actually a school teacher at the time, so I was doing it on weekends and I had one spare day, so it was quite intense. But I managed to do it. And in a way, what I was doing, I was embracing imperfectionism and I was writing things as they came to me rather than trying to get it right and perfect. So I would like to argue that excellence doesn't come from perfectionism. Excellence comes from imperfectionism. And what's popping into my head right now is a book I read quite a while back, and it was following different people and showing how they'd become absolutely brilliant experts, not because they were born geniuses, but it was more to do with the amount of practice they did. And they wrote about the Beatles, and they're saying that the band the Beatles, most people think of them as absolutely amazing and brilliant and geniuses, but when they follow and track their progress, they started at such a young age and they practiced in front of a crowd so many times. I think it was in Germany at first or another part of Europe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they were just in bars every single day, night after night, just practicing in front of an audience. And because they were in front of an audience so often, they were getting a lot of feedback. And that's why by the time they got into their later years, they seemed to be just naturally brilliant at what they did. They'd actually practiced a lot. And another example I remember was a group of people that were really good at table tennis. Again, I'm not sure which book this is from, um, but I remember reading how this particular group of people, there's a bunch of them, they're world champions at table tennis. It turns out that they all lived really close to each other or on the same street, and it's all because if they had the same teacher, and the teacher that they had made them practice very, very often, and they ended up being really good at table tennis. And so the book was arguing that although we imagine people who are really excellent at stuff are just naturally born that way, it's actually a lot to do with the amount of practice they do and the feedback that they get from the practice. So it's not just practicing, but practicing well. So getting feedback from what you do. And I think if we want to do something to an excellent standard, the more we're into perfectionism, the less likely we're going to do it. I did a little bit of research earlier before this session just to see what the tips that others give. And I read a lot of the tips and they didn't really resonate with me that much, apart from this one key one, which was to let go of the all or nothing mindset. And I think this is what happens to us when we want to do something really well and we end up being a bit too perfectionist about it. We either think, I need to get this absolutely right, or I'm not going to do it. And so what happens is that because we can't get it absolutely right, because it's the first time we're doing it and we're still going through the learning process, we end up not doing it at all. And because we don't do it at all, we procrastinate because of that, we cannot move towards excellence. Not perfect, because perfect's impossible. It's something you never get to. It's almost like the number infinity. You never get there. But improving things slightly takes practice and feedback. And so the more that you can do something on a daily basis, the more you can practice, and share things with others and collect that feedback in an imperfect way, the more practice you're going to get, and the more you can move towards excellence and greater confidence. And it's better for other people too, because they get to hear from you. So that's what I would argue about perfectionism and imperfectionism. The other thing that pops to mind, which links to mindfulness, is to do with identity. Because I notice some people say, oh, I am a perfectionist, or I'm not a perfectionist. But this sense of identifying ourselves with a certain trait, I think that's unhelpful, and we need to catch ourselves doing that. If you say, I am a perfectionist, you're identifying with something that's a challenge for you. And so you're going to almost reinforce that more and more often. Rather than saying that I'm a perfectionist, just say that, I am, I am a human being. And in the past, you may have tended to trying to do things in a perfect way. But if you identify I am a perfectionist, then you're going to keep trying to reinforce that. If you just say, hey, I'm a human being, and some human beings try to do things more perfect than others, and there's certain drivers or certain tendencies or motivation to try and do things too well and end up procrastinating. That's something that's happened in the past, and you may or may not do it today. But maybe today will be the day where you do something imperfect, and so then you can't call yourself a perfectionist. So this is something I've been exploring a lot in the last few months, is our sense of identity, who am I, our sense of self, and the value of tuning into pure awareness or consciousness or transcendent self or energy or emptiness, whatever you think is that which is beyond your ego, and letting go of this idea of telling ourselves a story, I am, followed by whatever, like I am a kind person or I'm an unkind person, because both of them are sentences that are quite rigid in a way. There's certain belief systems, and they can dictate what we need to do and how we need to act in the world. Whereas if you just think of yourself as, let's say, awareness, then anything can happen, and any challenge that you come across, you can deal with it in a creative way without saying I am this or I am that. So that's some of my thoughts on perfectionism and imperfectionism. Love to hear what you think about it. If you want to send an imperfect comment, then I'm happy to read it out. But yeah, if you want to find out more tips on things like this, oh great, we have one. Oh cool, thanks Haley. We've got one comment here. Ellie says, I think I definitely want everything to be perfect and put lots of stress on myself to achieve this. Also realize that I expect high of others, and if they aren't doing it, I will do it myself. How do you change that? Wow, that's a good one. So for the first one with I think it needs to, you know how they talk about, if you want to be compassionate to others, we need to be compassionate to ourselves. If we want to be kind to others, we need to start with ourselves. Maybe that would be the best approach rather than thinking about others. Think about how you could move towards being a little bit less perfect on yourself. And so, one tip that I've heard somewhere is to purposely do something imperfect and acknowledge that it will be uncomfortable doing that because of you've got this perfectionist tendencies as we all have to different levels. And so when you do something and it feels imperfect and you're sharing it with others in particular, there's going to be a discomfort there. So knowing that that discomfort is just a feeling, it's just a sensation in your body, and knowing that this is part of the process of embracing imperfectionism, and just also knowing that you're not perfect all the time. The think of to right now you've written some sentences out there. I'm sure I could find something which is not perfect about it. So we think that we're moving towards perfectionism, um, but actually, the fact that you've actually written this comment right now and shared something, others would be thinking, "Oh, I must write the perfect comment," and hesitate from doing that. So you can also embrace the fact that you are taking actions. The fact that you made that comment right there, that's not. So there isn't this sense of I am a perfectionist absolutely all the time because you've shown an example of taking actions in the past which weren't perfect and you've done it. So that would be the first thing that comes to mind. I'm just trying to think of some tips off the top of my head. The 80% rule you could do. So try and do something at 80% complete rather than 100%. And again, sharing it with others. Um, you could do some journaling activities. There's great opportunities to learn when we do journaling about perfectionism, and you can explore um, and mind map ways in which you can start to embrace imperfectionism. Um, and yeah, and I think work on that side. And once you start to be more kind of even more kind and more compassionate and more able to embrace the imperfectionism in yourself, you start to realize, hang on a minute, I can't do everything to a really high standard because it completely wears me out. And so why should I expect others to do that too? They can let them do to the best of their ability, and if they can't do it perfectly, then that's up to them. So there's some tips that come to mind. Love to hear from others as well. Does anybody have any other tips? There's loads of it's a very, very common challenge, perfectionism. So there's loads of articles and tips online too. So if you type in something like overcoming perfectionism, you'll find a bunch of tips. And so what I'm sharing with you might resonate with you, but you might think, actually, that doesn't really work for me. So then you could find something else, maybe some other suggestion or some other tip online, and then put it into practice. And maybe let us know in a week's time how it went. And you could even try a different tip every week or different approach every week. Um, but it's definitely moving from I must do everything perfect to let me do something and let me share it out there, and then I can improve upon that afterwards. Haley says, "Thank you, great tips. Things I'm not good at, such as singing. I say I'm an expert at singing badly." Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's funny. I like that. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I'm an expert at singing badly too. Then, brilliant. Oh, appreciate the comments and the ideas. And yeah, as I said, if you've got other ideas, or if anybody else has got other ideas or stories of how they've overcome perfectionism in their own way, I'd love to hear that too. Cool. Well, thanks for listening. Have a wonderful day, everyone. I hope it goes really imperfectly. Bye for now.